And Sasuke, and especially Code hunting down Amato for the sake of Ida. And there's also been a small discussion placing around Ida being the daughter of Amato, which is a possibility that I do think Kishimoto, who's not back in the story business of Boruto, would take and will take it since he likes showing methods, especially with the relationships potentially being built for Ida and Kwaki, or Ida and Boruto, and potentially Ida leading Kwaki down the path Kwaki when it takes in the future. I'm more leaning into take in terms of how to why Kwaki would betray Naruto. Yes, probably in a sake of protecting him in terms of the story, but once Kwaki sees the broader vision of how Naruto's um, influence as an Hokage never really touched him as a young boy, that would have perhaps um, deterred the events. In other words, Naruto's Hokage influence hasn't touched the village Boruto Kwaki was in, hasn't touched the village Boro touched, even though Boro was using that village and the disease as a way to have them come to his cult, even though in terms of the overall method of what Boro used, um, that is a lot better and showing a lot more sides to the character, even though that's more so of an episode review on showing the car members that have been taken away. As for Code, as far as we know, all we know is that he's a worshiper of Ishiki and the Sutsuki and their world conquering methods. I like it. It can get a series for a while, but there has to be a bit more that more people will love the Sutsuki, and not just for them being dimensional conquering entities familiar to the Vulture-mites or the Kryptonians, or even Darkseid for that matter, or even Thanos for that matter. So when it comes to the character of Ida and her overpowered clairvoyant abilities, I'm gonna say it's a 10 out of 10 job well done. People will not understand her ideology at first, but if you understand of how Marvel characters would use their powers as a curse, and how whoever gave it to them considered that a punishment or a curse upon themselves, that even though it's an overbearing, overdone ability of her clairvoyant abilities to see things in present time and also in her past, but just not all the way to her past her birth. And also when it comes to her other abilities, such as stealing one's mind, body, and soul, or heart, this will also enable her from ever feeling any genuine love, even if it genuinely mean it. So the only people that cannot fall under it is an obvious and Tsutskis, obviously, since they're way stronger, depending on the Tsutski, because if we talk about the cyborgs, she is also one of the cyborgs that Boro was ordered to deactivate. As for how she is stronger, because there is no implied karma on her, it just implied that she was modified. Because if Mado has the brains to modify her, along with some of Jigen's karma erected from Ishiki, and since they're all stronger than Jigen, who ripped apart Naruto and Sasuke first time, it's obviously stated that Amato is the most dangerous. Even though you have someone like Code, who is not he is smart enough to not use his full power immediately. In other words, if you've seen how Chapter 47 play out, they weren't gonna hunt down Naruto and Sasuke immediately, because A, it'd be too easy, and B, the story had to protect Naruto and Sasuke by making a powered up barbarian mode relative to dying Ishiki, who was stated who had to have his body to that the body he was in could not suffice his power. So it would be understandable that Naruto was able to exploit that weakness by also killing himself and killing Krama. Even though I think we were all prepared for Naruto to die, but also at the same time it wouldn't make any sense for what happened. But then, yes, it did give place to a lot of things, such as the determination for Boruto and Kwaki to become stronger. Now, of course, if you've seen how the, the methods of clashing between Boruto and Kwaki, and in terms of getting powerful, you will immediately know that Kwaki has a better, bigger point because regardless of the Shomi training and all that stuff, you guys will know that if you're a Naruto fan, you'll know that Naruto and from the leaves do not get stronger by normal methods. And when I mean stronger, I'm talking about to where Madara got to. I'm talking about where Kaguya is. I'm talking about to where the Itsuki is. Sure, Hago trained for Sage Mode, but he couldn't complete that until he sacrificed something. As for everything else involved revolving Boruto potentially being the only the only capable fighter of contending with Code because of his Jogan and also with his Kama resonance, there's going to be a huge power gap that Boruto has to contend with. So yes, they're even though if you've seen Touch 88 and before I even cover it, even though they're using Boruto's methods because of the conflict that happened already, they're gonna have a major disadvantage in a bid of an advantage, but it can be amped more if it went with the Kwakis, and I'll get to that. As for as as for the stating of how Ida was able to figure out um, that a model has scientific ninja replacement eyes so that they can deactivate the limiters on Code, because remember Code has the limiters on because if you had them off you'll be over Jigen, so he had done the limiters to pretty much limit the power he had. So it'll be obvious that you have a lot of abilities Jigen has and so much more that he adapted on his own because of him having his own karma that is practically a dead karma that cannot transmit any Mitsuki DNA. But now that he came across Ishiki's spirit, it was now amped, so it's a lot stronger than it already was. And since if the code say even while in limiters, he can still casually defeat Naruto Sasuke, we all believe it. As for what if Naruto and Sasuke were to come across, and would they think about their abilities of Code and Ida? Maybe a bit from Code. As for Ida, yeah, before the battle begins, it's kind of over for to come across. Now, if we were to come across and say, well, how would the story put it together? Are they even smart enough to do so? Because if you come across the Kage have already have already come across the fact that Naruto failed a couple of promises of keeping Rocky safe and also keeping the village safe, even though it's his own village. The problem is, though, he promised that to keep Rocky safe in a secret, along with Mitsuki, even though Mitsuki is his own thing, Orochimaru and all that, the public doesn't know about that, let alone of Mitsuki, let alone of Boruto being even the one White House can't go into alternate dimensions anymore, or parallel dimensions. As for the topic of something that I've covered in my Twitch stream was why the Kage is feeling so comfortable with the fact of them taking on another Tsutsuki that Tsutsuki's subordinate, even though that even though that Amado already went of his way to warn him that warn them that Jigen could that Coach is a lot stronger than Jigen without the limiters, but Code still confidently said that he still could. But since Code is that type of smart character, he won he wouldn't go in. Maybe not because he considers Siki, he considers him a threat, but he doesn't want any unnecessary run-ins like Ishiki had with Naruto Sasuke. Even in that body, he was still slamming Sasuke through walls. Even when Sasuke was still counting a couple of Ishiki's movements, that still wasn't enough until Sasuke lost his eye. When it comes to that, you can say that with the way they handle Momoshiki, they give him that confidence. Even though you can't say they handle Momoshiki when if you look at the anime and the manga and the movie, sure Boruto gets credit for just being there, but even though the individual personality should have been seen by Momoshiki with absolutely because of Rinnegan, but that whole fight is its own thing. Even though you could say it would give them some sort of naive confidence that, oh, we could take on these beings, no, they couldn't handle Madara, and Madara was nowhere close to strong as Momoshiki. Even though he's around there, still isn't contending in that subject matter in terms of raw power and in the usage of such. Even though Mother has more of a base since he, I don't know, Hashima were the first Shinobi gods to ever use such massive amounts of power, and then contending into that age, into where Yotsuki came. Even though it was a bit more unintentional, and him to figure out the Atsuki were a thing, and for the Kage to ever be like, oh, we can take on Atsuki, character gets slapped. It's all that because if they came across the entire client, it's self-explanatory, even though interpretation could be a bit, I'm not getting vague, I don't know. Anyway, as for the explanation and and once again, I said once again in Chapter 58 to 57, these two are for the fandom because it went across the ideology and powers for, I, it went across a lot of things, such as, well, Naruto's gonna have to kill Boruto because Boruto could potentially be an Ishiki level threat, and the Kage understand that just because they contend with one Itsuki doesn't mean they can contend with one stronger than them effortlessly. So, in order to slow down any unnecessary world-damaging threats, which of course are the Itsuki, the question is, will Naruto do it? And surprisingly, Naruto says yes, he will be ready to kill Boruto, which is very impressive. You can say that the death of Kurama is now shifting his ideology and Naruto's going a bit off of what he usually do. It's pretty interesting, but at the same time, Naruto's gonna have to suffer a bit more in order for my liking for Naruto to ever pretty much clean up of what he has done and from him as a Kage because he fucked up a lot and it's not turning out a mistake. It's just of his how his ideology made him want to make so much security risks as in leaving the gates open just because to have other the villagers to connect. Then all of a sudden he wants to kill an entire organization, even though he didn't want to kill Sasuke, didn't want to kill Itachi, didn't want to kill Nagato, and didn't want to kill Obito just because he understood them. I think more respect would go to him if he did. But in terms of all that and Naruto switched you could say karma is it, but I'm gonna say that chapter 47 and 58 don't really go out of the way to explain Naruto's mentality as it shifted. So overall in chapter 57, other than the comedic exchange between Code and Ida and the potential footing between Code and Ida, it's pretty simple that I'll get one. It's pretty it's pretty simple that the with the alliance code and are having the potential romance between Kwaki and Ida, and also with that potentially leading down to Kwaki's betrayal. Even though it could be us an interesting it could be like an interesting romance that Kishimoto would want to build, and the relation and the only person ever to really understand Kwaki would have to be Ida, especially with her seeing Kwaki's life, and also having something very similar to it in terms of both of them hating a model. In fact, I think all three of them do. Of course, if he does that, Code will be on her ass, especially ever since he hates Kwaki for hating the Karma Seal. As for the all the all the other things involving what if a bug snitched on them, she knows. In fact, it's not a problem if anyone snitches on them. In terms of why the Kage still are sending people out after these people who are so nasty with power. So in other words, the Kage are like, yeah, we have no choice but to do what we can do at this point. Understandable, but you would think getting smacked by Momoshiki, destroyed by Madara, horrified by Kage that they will take a smart decision to send people head first to get murdered by Code, who's in a blood rampage. And also when it comes to, let's say, Code versus Ida, if they have to round around two, it would be pointless. In fact, if having a Tsutsuki, that'll be a very interesting battle to see. Even though Code has the blessing of a Tsutsuki, doesn't mean he is one. Catchphrase is again a transition into it, but still has its own meat, showcasing, let's say, the art. I love the art for both showcasing Ida and also showcasing Boruto and Crockett on two different sides. Also, it showcases um, what Amano gave to Naruto at Tech 7, which was the pills. And of course, I made a joke which is true that if any normal hiker were to eat the pills, they would immediately die. Especially since these Byakuya killing pills are for Atsuki, of course it will nullify anything weaker than such DNA or do immediate blindness to any nearby Hyuga. Of course, I can see it going south pretty badly from there. Make the story more interesting, And when it comes to Boruto's resolve to eat them immediately, of course, if you're in the Boruto fandom, it's this great Boruto, this is great willpower growth from Boruto, and also just him being prepared and him seeing the worst, especially what he did to Sasuke. So yeah, you can say that the effects of what happened in the previous chapter 50 chapters, well, you can definitely see it on also on how Boruto does react to straight up. It's comedic. I like seeing the comedic vibes where Naruto's like, "What the hell? You did it immediately?" And then you can just see a lot of Naruto in Boruto, but also a lot of just regular old Boruto going up just by him by himself. But in terms of him following his own destiny or just countering either ones from the one from Momoshiki's destiny to Tornado's destiny, I think he's gonna do both, if not neither, in terms of how he does it. Sure, it may activate the pure eye in terms of the pills, or it could just turn Boruto fully blind. Even though even though the fight between Boruto and Team Seven and Code could result in Mitsuki dying, Sadara dying, or if it's because the only way you can keep them alive is if the fight doesn't happen, and ultimately this is where we transition into Boruto versus Kwaki. Kwaki has the idea of the Karma Seal be into Code, and at first I wasn't the biggest idea follower of that plan because I was like that would just power up Code. But the one thing I also realized is that he has a stronger karma. So then um, he code will code will be able to hold it, and as Border becomes more shaky, his essence can pass on to code and become another vessel for Boruto. So Boruto will become Boruto inside of code in a much stronger body. Of course, this will make Boruto absolutely broken. And that idea is a very cool idea, but the problem is the story won't go with that idea because it will make Boruto a bit too strong. Um, Even though I don't think I would mind. I think I believe it's more on Bolter is already broken with the joke, and even though we don't know the extent of it, we're just aware that it has something to do with um, consuming a whole bunch of trees um, from different realms that will one day make the user and potentially a universal level threat or in nigh omniscient or nigh or fully omniscient being in terms of just power and and all that. As a board wasn't didn't really like that plan on understandably, and he thought it was a hypothetical, and he thought there wasn't a chance. The problem is, Border's not a big plan of using people in terms of that. Understandably why, but at the same time, it's kind of growth on Bordeaux's part, especially with he wasn't a big fan of even how Kraki will like to fight in terms of he wanted to train in terms of pure shinobi. The problem is he never understood why and how Naruto Sasuke got their powers, or what he thought even after seeing Naruto's power was that well Naruto trained that hard. Kwaki pretty much just stated that they would never catch up to what Naruto Sasuke Naruto by pure training, which is something that I went on my way to state on stream again. As for as for why Boruto would ever think this, you can argue that is because that's the only way they ever got stronger to defeat Deepa, defeat Boro. But the only way they defeated Boro was yes, Sora took the opportunity to steal Boro's heart, and then guess who helped out? Someone way powerful than anyone there, Boroshiki. Now, as for anything else in terms of power and the fight that broke out between Boruto and Kwaki, well, Kwaki and Team Seven, you can straight up see that Kwaki has a point in terms of how he was raised and how he was and how he was capable of being an exact fighter and how he was. He fights like an Atsuki and thinks like an Atsuki, but at the same time, it's for a cynical Boruto wants. Of course, Roborto, it's a very naive way, not necessarily hypocritical. It's more of just him thinking in a certain direction, even though he never really asked Naruto how did he get his power. He's never trained to have Grandma inside of him, and Sasuke never trained to get the Rinnegan. He lost a lot to get his Mangekyu, and he lost himself to get a Rinnegan. In terms of that whole shtick and the ideology, but I have a separate video for Hagamo versus Ishiki, explain the ideology war and why it's a bit different, but it also could be a debunking video against Naruto explain. But check that one out; that would be fun. As for as for the fight that breaks out, you can immediately just tell that Kwaki, being the aggressive, tortured fighter he is, immediately takes on. Hold up, so yeah. And anyway, so the the fight breaks out. It was a very interesting that the spoilers indicated that there was a fight specifically between Sada and Crockett since they're both alphas or captains of their own selves. And also, and also, if you were to have a direct battle between Sada and Crockett, if Sada were to use her Sharingan and to go all out against Crockett, it would be a very different battle. But I wouldn't say Sada would immediately win, even though the Genjutsu would would have an immediate result on that. If not, if we're saying Karma can negate Genjutsu, but he doesn't have that, which ultimately led to Hawking losing the fight. If we're talking about the fight itself, I could see it being in a stick figure about being very fast, very aggressive, as it's Boruto having a stubborn advantage with him having the karma, and a lot of his jutsu are amped because of it, along with potentially his Jogan. There's no doubt that Boruto was able to win in the matter of in like 20 minutes, I believe. As for Quacky begrudgingly and like willing to um, go along with Boruto, this honestly plants the seeds for Boruto and Crockett to clash in the future. Of course, if we talk about the ideals of Shinobi versus the end of Shinobi, I'm gonna say Boruto changes a lot in the future in terms of his growth. Instead of having a dogmatic view of Shinobi, of how he first had or how he had it going, going now, especially with the pain he that is basically shown in the future in terms of how Boruto would become. Of course, do I want him to be like a let's get together everyone type person? No, I like him to be a bit more on the a lot more on, even though I don't mind a bit of um, Kaneki side in terms of a monster Boruto becomes and why Boruto Crockett fight. This just plants the seed. There's nothing permanent in terms of like why they fight eventually. Even though straight up it's the Shinobi era versus the end of it. So especially with it's coming. So it's been your boy Sam the Grit, and we out. Whew.